Beyond the Pelvis is hosted by Dr. Keneal Siegel, a pelvic floor PT and intuitive healer, and Laura Haraka, a somatic practitioner and breathwork facilitator. Each week, we explore alternative and holistic approaches to healing chronic pelvic pain and other painful or chronic conditions. Join us and other experts in mind, body, and spiritual healing as we discuss a wealth of modalities ranging from ancient practices to modern therapies that challenge the conventional Western model of treatment. Let's get right to it. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Pelvis. Today, Laura and I are speaking with Celine Tien. She is the CEO and founder of Flowly, and you may have heard of it. It's a virtual clinic designed for the 1 in 5 Americans living with chronic pain, and they currently have a 12-week program focusing on non-structural pain, which empowers patients to manage pain, anxiety, and stress in their day-to-day lives. And Flowly integrates behavioral health support through licensed therapists trained in pain psychology, along with the VR and biofeedback system that enables self-guided practice. And Celine, it's great to have you here. I know we had connected a few years ago after I heard about Flowly somewhere on YouTube. And I thought, oh, this is cool. It's like virtual reality. And it was just around the time when I was learning about HRV and resonance and breathing. And then I just thought like, wow, this system it's all built in. It sort of guides you and it helps you do that, which I thought was really great. And I knew we wanted to speak with you to have you on to really expose people to what Flowly is and how beneficial breathing can be. We talk about breathing and breath work quite a bit on this podcast, and Flowly I feel like is different because it sort of guides you, and the fun of the virtual reality is part of that. So thank you for being here with us and sharing.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you share a little bit about more about how you got into this specific,
Mm,
how
yeah.
you got into Flowly? How did Flowly become a thing?
Yeah, good question. It's a little bit of a windy road, so bear with me, but the idea for Flowly really came out of my personal experience growing up around loved ones who suffered from pain. And I think really through them, I learned that pain was not just physical. Pain is psychological, feeling anxious, feeling afraid, having trouble sleeping, but it was also social, like feeling very isolated or feeling like no one else really understands what you're going through on a day-to-day basis. And even though this is something I grew up with during COVID, I think this really hit home for me because two of my loved ones I was living with, one was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and the other one had an invisible illness. And both, experienced pain, and I think it took another angle for me where I understood what pain was from a caregiving perspective as well. And so it's really reinforced the mission we've had now at Flowly, which along with my two co-founders, Julian Soros and Nuri Kim, they've really helped me sort of build out this vision of a space where we can really look at pain holistically and just recognize that it's something that we all experience. For some people, it's more severe and impacts their day to day more, but something that we can all really learn how to heal from.
Wow, it sounds like such an interesting program. So,
Mm,
can you tell us a little bit more, maybe, about how the program works? Like when
yeah.
someone is going to sign up for it, what would happen? What would they expect?
Yeah, so the way the program works today is most people either find us through, podcast episodes, or actually very often it's word of mouth through friends or family, or a trusted clinician or provider or doctor refers them to Flowly. And then the next step is they'll actually go through an assessment call with a care manager who actually gets on a call with them, an actual human care manager, not an AI, that you'll actually speak with and be able to understand, okay, what is the program about? Am I a fit for the program? We'll also be able to assess, okay, are you, is kind of what you're experiencing aligned with what we're going to be providing support on. And then if it seems like it's a mutual fit, then the next step is you are assigned a dedicated therapist who's trained in pain psychology, and you're actually working with this therapist on a weekly basis in one-on-one virtual sessions over video calls for 12 weeks. And then between your sessions with your therapist, we send you an at-home virtual reality and biofeedback kit that allows you to engage and practice what you've learned with your therapist, but now in your own time at home. And I think a lot of us who have had the experience of therapy before, a lot of times we realize that the real work of therapy comes not with your one-on-one session with your therapist, but in the times where you actually have to reinforce and practice and put into your actual life what you've learned from your therapist. And that's kind of the beauty of the VR and the biofeedback and the app that comes along with it, is that you get this opportunity to really practice what you've learned in skills with the therapist you're working with. And then a question I always get is, okay, what does the VR experience and biofeedback experience actually look like? And it's all phone enabled, so it's very easy to use. You have an app on your phone, you slip it into a VR headset that we send directly to your home. It's a beautiful kit. And literally from your bed or your couch, you'd slip on the headset and a sensor onto your finger. And it feels like you're sitting on the beach with aurora lights above you in the night sky, or you're in the bamboo forest, or you're wandering through the mountains. So these beautiful environments are incredibly relaxing in of itself. But at the core, we're actually collecting your real-time heart rate. We're showing it to you, and then we're teaching you through the breath work, the voiceover with CBT and different mindfulness practices, and some gamified experiences, how to actually shift your nervous system from a state of fight or flight, where that pain and that anxiety lives, into your rest, digest, and relaxation, where your healing and your rest and your sleep exists. And that way you can kind of turn off those pain signals and learn how to activate the signals we do want, which is ones that key us into restful sleep, into healing, into recovery. And then as you do better and better, the world in VR actually responds to you. So more aurora borealis gets brighter and more colorful, or more flowers grow, or animals come out, sort of positively reinforce what you're learning through the breath work, the mindfulness, and the biofeedback.
I will say from personal experience, because I still actually use Flowly and my children love it. But the fact that it interacts with you and it changes based on your performance, that's the gamified part of it. It really encourages you more. It's like that positive psychology. Like you want to do better. You want to like find an actual flow, and you want to see like, ooh, how long was I actually in flow this time? And then compare it to the last time, and it keeps track. It's a really well designed system and
Yeah.
very fun. And the voice is quite soothing. The music is relaxing. The visuals are really great as well.
Yeah. I love that you brought up the flow state, because that's why our company and our program is called Flowly. Is because essentially what we're teaching people to do is, how do you on command enter a flow state? And for people that don't know what flow state is sort of that perfect intersection between relaxation and focus. It's a lot of times, for example, folks that do archery with a bow and arrow, you kind of have to enter that perfect flow state to stay really still, but be able to focus on hitting that target. Or a lot of times writers will get into flow states, surfers, just any activity where you're really engaged in the activity itself. Just doing it is rewarding in of itself, and you're not thinking about time, you're not thinking about other things. That really joyful, focused experience of flow state kind of brings our body and our mind into a state of recovery and healing. And that's what we want to teach people how to do through these VR and biofeedback experiences from home.
So it's so great. You said so many great things. I love the fact that they get real-time data. So they can go on and find out their heart rate and other, I'm sure, different feedback that's happening in their body at the time, which is awesome. And the other thing that you mentioned, which is so great, is, I go to therapy,
Mm.
and I've been going since my own chronic pain condition. And it's really what you do in between the sessions that makes all the difference in the world, because it's, one thing going to the therapy for 45 minutes to an hour, but it's what you practice in between and applying it. And this seems like such a great system that you put into place where you're giving people real-time data feedback, which I really love about your system. It's excellent.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think what you're saying is about the work between the sessions is so important. You know, a lot of times we take it for granted. Like when you go to school, you have your classroom time and then you go home, you do homework, right? And then, or when you go to your physical therapist, you're with your PT in the office, but then they give you bands or balls to use and work at home because that's when the actual sort of work happens. And I think, you know, a lot of times we were thinking about how do we have that balance between that person to person connection. So you working with a human therapist and them understanding you, your context, your story, really customizing your journey and your healing for you, but plus the ability to have these self-guided sessions at home where you're practicing everything you've learned. And so I think that balance is really important. And it's what we found has been the most successful for us at Flowly, because we've done a lot of iterations of Flowly. We've been through randomized controlled clinical trials. We were awarded a grant by the NIH. Like, you know, we've done a lot of research and work in this space. And I think what we found is that balance between that human interaction and the self-guided work is incredibly important.
You know, I teach breath work. I'm a breath work facilitator, and I'll teach courses and workshops. And then I check back in the next week and we meet. How's everybody doing? But a lot of times people don't put the work in. And what I really think is great about your product here is you make healing fun with the
Mm.
virtual aspect.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing that up because I think the fun aspect is something we don't talk about enough, which is, you know, VR is just fun. It's just a fun experience and it's gamified and you know, you could build the most effective therapy in the world, but if the person is not wanting to use it, then it's not going to work, right? You have to actually engage with it. And I think that's where my background and my co-founder Naree's background in design really comes in. So you know, before this, I was at DreamWorks Animation, and I come from a background of entertainment and storytelling. And you know, Naree and I always talk about, and even with Julian as well, like how do we bring in storytelling into a health experience? Because when we think about our health, we always think of it as it's kind of scary. Like nobody really wants to go to their doctor's office. No one wants to go to the dentist. It's not something you're craving, and it's also intensely private and vulnerable. So is there a way to make our experience with healing and our health beautiful and fun even? And I think that's what that VR element also brings in.
Do you mind sharing about the types of conditions that are best utilized by Flowly?
Yeah. Yeah, good question. So, you know, we always talk about chronic pain, but chronic pain is a huge amount of people and encompasses so many different conditions. It's 1 in 5 Americans. That's about almost 70 million people that have chronic pain. So under chronic pain, we actually like to usually define it under two large umbrellas. First is structural pain, and the second is non-structural pain. So structural pain is typically what we think of when we think of pain. We think of a physical injury, like you might get into a car accident, a bike accident. You might actually see that pain point in a scan, right? So you actually have an injury associated with that pain point. The problem is most types of chronic pain, which is defined as pain as being existing for more than 3, 6, 8 months after that initial injury, it's no longer structural. Most types of chronic pain is actually non-structural pain. And non-structural pain is where that initial physical injury has already healed, but the nervous system still believes that there is danger. So it continues to send pain signals to the brain and the body, so that you're existing in this perpetual cycle of pain. And non-structural pain can encompass conditions like low back pain. It can encompass fibromyalgia, migraines, complex regional pain syndrome. A lot of folks experiencing autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's, lupus, they also have a non-structural pain component. And the problem is we talk so much about structural pain, like you can go to physical therapy, you can do all these different things or surgery, trigger point injections for structural pain. But if you're not treating the non-structural pain aspect, which is, the nervous system still being in fight or flight mode, your cortisol levels are up, your anxiety is high, you're having trouble sleeping, then you're never going to cut that perpetual cycle of pain that you live in. And so that's really what we focus on. We focus on treating and managing that non-structural pain. And that the way you really do that is you have to learn how to turn off those pain signals in your brain. You have to atrophy those neural pathways in your brain associated with pain and really build new neural pathways around healing and joyful experiences that aren't to do with that. And that encompasses so many different modalities like breath work, mindfulness, but it includes that biofeedback, that virtual reality therapy. It includes emotional processing and how does trauma from your past affect your ability to take in stressors and how that translates to pain in your body, etc. That was kind of a long-winded answer for what types of pain we really focus on, but I guess the answer really is we focus on this non-structural pain, and most types of people with pain have an element of non-structural pain.
So I'm just curious, when people have completed your program, do they do a follow-up call with you? Is there basic like success rates that you've seen, a decrease in chronic pain?
Yeah, so we've conducted randomized controlled clinical trials at University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, which was also funded by the National Institutes on Health and National Institute on Drug Abuse. And we saw an average 35% reduction in opioid usage in the first 8 weeks of intervention. And then in additional pilots and studies we've done with other organizations and health plans, we've seen significant reductions in anxiety, improvements in sleep, improvements even in stress and burnout levels as well. And I think that's really because, again, we're really treating and managing the whole body. And that impacts everything, right? Impacts how you're physically experiencing the pain, but also, recovering from the feelings of anxiety or fear or even anger that you might experience in the process.
And then can you talk about how something as simple as the breathing, because that's really all the virtual reality is doing, like what is the science behind that in helping to
Mm,
reduce pain and or anxiety?
yeah. So that's a great question. So to answer that, I'm gonna kind of zoom back a little bit more and talk about the nervous system. So our nervous system, many people might already know this, but we have two branches. We have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. The sympathetic is your fight or flight mode, and the parasympathetic is your rest and digest mode. Now, when you have chronic pain, or even when you have high levels of anxiety, stress, your fight or flight mode is constantly on, right? Your body is always thinking there's a threat, there's a danger, so I need to turn that on. And the problem is when that fight or flight mode is habitually turned on, you are sending signals throughout your bodies. You're actually deploying actual proteins throughout your body that will break down muscle and tissue that create pain, increases your cortisol levels that increase stress and anxiety and more. And it's extremely harmful for your body over time. So what we really have to learn how to do is turn off that sympathetic mode and learn to turn on our parasympathetic rest and digest mode. Now, how do you turn on that rest and digest mode that we all want to be in? The answer can come in multiple ways, but one really significant way you can impact your nervous system and turn on that rest and digest mode is through something called your heart rate variability. It's called HRV. And heart rate variability has been gaining a lot more public conversation and traction in recent years, especially because it's something that athletes have been aware of for many, many years. Heart rate variability actually refers to the difference in time between your heartbeats. And a lot of times we think of our heart beating at the same rate, like it's chugging along like boom, 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 like a train that's not really speeding up, it's not really slowing down. That's actually not true. Our heart rate is actually changing beat to beat. So when we inhale, and you can feel for your heart rate right now, when we inhale, your heart speeds up. And when we exhale, your heart slows down. And you actually want that difference to be large. You want your heart rate to actually speed up a lot when you inhale and slow down a lot when you exhale, because that means your body can actually speed up to perform when it needs to, and then it can slow down to heal and recover when it needs to as well. So when we think about a super healthy person, like let's say an Olympic athlete, a track runner, when they go to run their race, their heart is able to speed up super fast so that they can engage all their muscles, engage their adrenaline, and run super, super fast. But that healthy athlete, when they stop that race, their heart can actually immediately slow down so that their body goes into recovery mode. And that's what a lot of us are not able to do. We're not able to speed up to perform. And most of all, we're not able to slow down to recover. But when we are able to increase our HRV, our heart rate variability, it's almost like gaining the key to turning off that sympathetic mode when we want to and turning on that parasympathetic mode when we want to. So you're actually learning how to speed up your heart rate and slow down your heart rate to get into that rest and digest mode. And you're asking me, okay, how is breath work related to that? Well, how do you actually increase your HRV? It's through breath work. So you can actually, through your breath, control your heart rate. And that's why I said, you can right now feel for your pulse. If you take a second right now, feel for your pulse on your neck or on your wrist and take some slow breaths in, some slow breaths out. And you might be able to feel that your heart rate is speeding up with that inhale and then slowing down with your exhale. And so we can actually teach you to breathe at certain rates and in certain ways so that you are on command, sort of controlling your heart rate to shift into that rest and digest mode, which is incredibly important for recovery and for healing, especially if you have pain, anxiety, or more.
I think the beauty of this is that this, as you said, it teaches people how to be aware of this so that, because I've definitely been more aware of it since I've been doing more breath work, and Flowly helps with that as well, is noticing when my heart rate is high when it doesn't need to be, right? Because now you notice it. And then instinctively knowing, oh, I can just do a few breaths and extending my exhale to make sure that I sort of shift myself into this parasympathetic mode. So I'm not staying in sympathetic mode all the time. And we talk about this quite a bit on this podcast about how people are often stuck in this sympathetic and we're not meant to live there. We're supposed to be in parasympathetic most of the time, shift into sympathetic when we need to, and then come right back. The problem is we don't shift back into parasympathetic. So we end up staying there. And it's as simple as just breathing that can bring us back into that. We remind people all the time that that's the easiest way and the only way that we actually do have conscious control over our nervous system. Thank you for sharing that and putting that into your device. I think it's excellent. I mean, we're going to say that a million times.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that what you said is really important. And, it's amazing that you guys talk about it because I actually think it's not talked about enough. That how much we are triggered into our sympathetic mode day to day. And not to double down on this even more, but I think one analogy that has been really helpful to us and the patients, and here we call our patients heroes that we work with, is analogy of the house. Um, and especially for folks that may have had some sort of trauma. So whether that's physical or emotional trauma, this is really important. So the analogy goes like, imagine today that your body was a house, and your house has a security system, right? And one day your house gets burglarized, like someone breaks in. That's a traumatic incident. And you're kind of scared after. You're like, oof, like that was kind of scary. I want to up the security at my house. So I'm going to install more cameras and more motion detectors. And what happens now after that incident is that while your security system is more boosted, things that are not that dangerous keep setting it off. So like a leaf falling or a squirrel running by will set off the motion detector and the cameras, and the alarm is set off. And then the police comes and everything kind of like goes into turmoil. And that's actually what's happening in the body of somebody with chronic pain or even with anxiety, right? Your body is a house, and then your security system is like the nervous system. And so when something traumatic happens to you, and it could be small or big trauma, I always say small trauma could be a breakup, could be traumatic, or it could be financial stress, or it could be an accident, right? But when trauma happens to you, your nervous system wants to protect you. It's a security system. So it's going to boost its ability to be alerted to any danger that comes its way. But the problem is all these little triggers in our life that are not necessarily dangerous now set us off into a huge mode of like, let's save the body, let's put ourselves into fight or flight mode. And these triggers can be like a phone notification, like an email from our boss. It could be a fight with a family member. It could just any little small thing keeps setting us off into this negative cycle. And so we really need to basically learn how to reset our security system so that it can work for when the actual dangerous things happen, but it's going to be able to rest and be okay for all the other things that don't need to set us into alarm.
I thought you've given such great explanations, especially of HRV. The I usually give the explanation to my clients of like a cat. Like we want to be agile like a cat, but then we want to be able to then go back into a state of
Mm.
rest and digest. And there's been so many studies done lately with cats, how they've been like good for our nervous system, the purring of the cat. But it's
I love
amazing
that.
how they can just spring into action kind of, when they need to. So, but I
Mhm.
thought you gave a really beautiful explanation of what HRV is. So, I'm just curious a little bit more about the type of breath work that you do because I'm certified in like, oh my God, 4 types of breath work. And because there's so many, I really love exploring the breath because I find at different times in my day, even times in my life, I like a different or certain type of breath work. And I want to give my clients many choices. So, what kind of breath work do you explore in or you utilize in your program?
Yeah, great question. So, we have been releasing more and more different types of breathwork exercises, especially to do with the program, so that, there's continued sort of education, continued practice. Even after the 12 weeks is over, you maintain access to the app and the VR experiences. But I will say that a lot of the program, especially the basics, is built around a specific type of breathwork called resonant frequency breathing. And resonant frequency breathing is really all about increasing that HRV, which is what we were talking about. You don't increase your HRV just by doing any type of breath work. Breath work can be tailored to so many different outcomes you're looking for. But resonant frequency breathing turns out each of us have a unique breathing rate we can inhale and exhale at that will most increase our HRV, and it's unique to each person. And in the first week of Flowly in the app, we actually we're able to calibrate and find out what is that unique breathing rate for you that will increase your HRV. And once you know that, and once the system knows that, it will start to basically introduce that breathing rate so that it gets better and better for you, more comfortable, and something that you can really start to utilize even outside of sessions of Flowly. I will say, as a fun fact, the average resonant frequency breathing rate across humans is 6 breaths per minute, but it can range. So some people it's 7.2, for some people it's 8, for some people it's 5. So that's just the average.
And then if I'm not mistaken, is that about 5 to 7 seconds inhale,
That's
exhale?
right.
Right.
It's about 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out for the average. But again, it's different for each person.
Yeah. I thought that was really interesting learning that because it was around the same time I was also getting into like HRV and looking into devices to measure that for myself personally, because I just wanted to know, like, I want to optimize this body and this person who I am. And then I'd come across some research about that. And then I heard about Flowly and thought, oh, it'd be really cool to find out like my personal resonant frequency breathing. And it was quite interesting. I think it's for me, it's like between 5 and 6 breaths per minute, which you say that to people and they're like, what? That is not a lot of breathing. But if you really slow down and take these like fully conscious, intentional breaths, it feels really good and it doesn't feel that suffocating, which I've heard people say,
Yeah.
"Look, I can't breathe." Well, you get used to it. And it takes practice, like with anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. That practice is really key.
So can you talk a little bit more about the program itself, like the 12-week program? Like what does that look like? If someone signed up today, what does that look like?
Yeah, so, the way it works for on the hero side is the first they begin with an assessment and a diagnostic session with their therapist. And then after that, you work through a curriculum that is really tailored towards pain neuroscience. So it's a lot of education. So you're actually learning about a lot of things we talk about today, like the nervous system, how different aspects, we call it the biopsychosocial dynamic, how it all impacts your sleep, your anxiety levels, how that impacts pain, etc. And then each week there's a different module you're focused on. So we have a week on anxiety and pain. And then we have a week on anger. How does that affect your pain levels, or how does pain affect that level? We have one on sleep. We have one on engaging tools, and how potentially in the future you might have a relapse even of your chronic pain coming back, and how do you deal with that? And this is all very specific curriculum, education, and then practice you're doing with your therapist and in the VR sessions that is all synced to each other so that it's a cohesive program. And then after the 12 weeks is over and you've graduated, you can maintain access to Flowly and have new VR worlds that you can explore. And I actually think after the 12 weeks, you actually get access to even cooler worlds because it's a little bit more advanced. There's more storylines, it's more gamified, and more different types of breath work. Because at that point, you can really handle the different things that we're kind of throwing at you in the VR sessions. And then you can still maintain access to your therapist. They'll check in with you every couple months, and you can opt for one-off sessions, but hopefully by then you feel like I'm kind of on my 2 feet, and I can really put into practice in my own life all the tools that I've learned and how it specifically fits into my lifestyle, and if I've accomplished the goals that I've set out from the beginning of the program.
So if people wanted to sign up for your program, where would they find you? Would they go to your website? How would that look like?
Yeah, great question. So you can go to our website, which is www.flowly.world. And we do take some out of pocket heroes. We have a wait list. So if you're interested, you can reach out to us, contact@flowly.world, or there's a lot of contact sheets on our website. And then we are launched in Michigan and Florida. In Michigan and Florida, specifically, I say launched as in we are covered by certain health plans in those two states. And so if you live in Florida or Michigan and you're interested in Flowly, it could be a covered benefit for you. Some people have a little bit of copay, some no copay at all. It just depends on your health plan and what insurance you're with. So you can definitely inquire on our website to find out. And if you are not in Michigan or Florida, first of all, we hope to be in your state soon and covered, but we also have the out-of-pocket plan. And for many years, we were just out of pocket, but my goal personally as a founder was always how can we get this more and more accessible? So we're trying to work with more insurance and more providers in different states. So also, if you're interested in getting Flowy to your state or with your doctor, just reach out to us, contact@flowy.world, and we have a really amazing hero experience team that will get back to you.
I just want to touch base on one thing that I don't know if we talked about enough is I love the fact that you call your clients heroes. Having had chronic pain myself, I had chronic pelvic pain. I find that the people that heal from pelvic pain and even their caretakers are probably some of the strongest and courageous people in the entire world because living with chronic pain is not an easy thing to do. And taking care of someone with chronic pain is not an easy thing to do. So I really think it's such a nice way to refer to your clients. It's really meaningful too.
Yeah, no, thank you for highlighting that. So we actually came up with that during COVID, and it was when I was personally actually going through a really hard time. And it was the first time in my life where I felt like I was reliant on Flowly, actually, like my own program and product. I hadn't before. It was like I was something we were doing for other people, and during COVID, it was like now it was something very personal, something I was doing for myself. And I realized in that process that in your recovery journey, you really have to be the hero of your own journey there. And a lot of times it made me also respect the patients and the heroes we were working with even more, because I realized that how much agency they have taken over their own healing journey in becoming basically their own doctors. A lot of times, the folks we work with, they're even more they're more read up and educated on new science and innovation in this space because they're so desperate for a solution. They're looking everywhere, they're reading all the papers, they're doing everything. And it's just, I realize like how much effort and also heartache, but also bravery that entire journey takes. And so that was really where where we realized we should just call our patients what they are, heroes.
It really makes me think of the hero's journey, and maybe that was part of how that came up for you, whereas the hero has to go through this major crisis, but then comes home a totally different person. And I can see someone using this or experiencing chronic pelvic pain or any chronic condition, really, and it sort of taking over their lives, and they have to now use that and transform themselves by getting control over their nervous system. And at the end of the day, they come out a completely different person where they can see things that they weren't able to see before and do and experience things that they weren't able to, or in a totally different way. And having gained control over your nervous system, it really does increase your resilience. It's not that the pain
Mm,
is going to come back, you just have more tolerance for that, or the things that cause your anxiety, it's not, they don't go away, they don't change, you have changed. And that's the
mm.
story of the hero's journey. And I love that.
Yeah. Wait, that's such a beautiful way of putting it. It reminds me of, how we always say that hopefully after the program, we're actually not taking you back to baseline. We're taking you above it. It's not just back to normal. How do you thrive actually? How do you get even better? And just, I think a lot of times, we talk to our chronic pain patients and they tell us they feel like lost, they feel like almost like they have a deficit from other normal, quote unquote normal people or healthy people that don't have pain. And then after the program they tell us, these heroes, they were like, it's crazy, like now I feel like I have so much more control over my nervous system and my brain and my mind, that it's something that it's like a superpower that someone that maybe hadn't gone through this trauma I have wouldn't have ever gained. So it does become your power in many ways.
So I'm just curious if for our listeners, if there's anything you learned or any guidance you want to give for our listeners out there, any lasting lessons or any advice that you want to share.
So many come to my mind. So I would say like on a spiritual or sort of emotional lofty level, I think, imparting the story of resilience, what you were saying just now is probably the most important. That's, I think, the number one thing we could impart on somebody to help empower them more is how do you build your own resilience? And there's so many ways and tools to do that. There's a lot of programs to do that. It doesn't have to be Flowly. That's just something we focus on. And I think that's really important, is cultivating that resilience in yourself. On a practical level, the thing that I want to impart on everybody is, one, breath work is really important. And there's a lot of ways to engage with that. So whether it's not, it's Flowly, find that way for you. And the second, which is arguably even more important, is sleep. Sleep is probably one of the most significant things that will impact your pain. Not only does pain cause you to sleep less, if you sleep less, it will actually cause pain. So it is not something to ignore. And we have a whole week dedicated to sleep because that's how important it is. And you could probably have a whole program dedicated to sleep and how it impacts your mind and your body. But that would be the number one priority I would have for everybody, is how do you increase the quality and the time of sleep?
Thank you for that. Like, sleep is one of my favorite things. For like birthdays and Christmas, my children know, Mommy, other than sleep, what do you want? Because it is so important. So thank you for bringing that up. And we can talk more about sleep another time because that's a whole other thing. But hopefully this was really helpful for someone. I appreciate you showing up and sharing all the beauty that you have to offer in your program and leaving those last words. Breathe and sleep, guys. That's it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
If you'd like to leave us a message or ask a question, please check the show notes with the link so you can reach us directly, or email us at beyondthepelvis@gmail.com.